Ballston Brighton District City Councilor. Today is April 22nd, and we are here with our good friends from Public Facilities Department and BuildBPS as part of the Boston Public School team. I'd like to remind folks this is a public hearing and is being broadcast and recorded on Comcast Channel 8, RCN 82, Verizon 1964, and streamed at boston.gov/city-council-TV. I ask folks in the chamber to silence their electronic devices. At the conclusion of the departmental presentation and questions from my colleagues, we will take public testimony. There is a sign-in sheet to my left by the door. I ask that you sign in, check the box if you do wish to testify publicly, and state your name, affiliation, and residence. This budget review will encompass around 34 hearings over roughly the next 7 weeks. We strongly encourage residents, whether here in the chamber or at home, to take a moment to engage in this process by giving testimony for the record. There are several ways to do this. You can come and attend one of the hearings and sign up. You can come to the hearing dedicated to public testimony on Tuesday, June 4th, anytime from 2 to 6 p.m. We will be here for at least that amount of time, and if we need to, we will stay longer until everyone is heard. You can send your testimony to the Committee on Ways and Means, City Council, 5th floor, Boston City Hall, Boston 02201, or email the committee at ccc.wm@boston.gov. We are here today again to review PFD and BuildBPS as part of Dockets 0622 through 0625. Orders for the FY20 operating budget, including annual appropriations for departmental operations, annual appropriations for the school department, appropriation for other post-employment benefits, and appropriation for certain transportation and public realm improvements, as well as dockets 0626 through 0628, capital budget appropriations, including loan orders and lease and purchase agreements. Just wanted to see who came in. Sorry. And before I hand it over to the department, I was just going to ask my colleagues, since we have kind of a two-part hearing today, where we have public facilities to talk about their capital projects. We also have BuildBPS. So I would ask that maybe the first round, or as many rounds as it takes, we'll start with PFD, and then we'll go into the BuildBPS for the second or third rounds. Thank you. Let me introduce my colleagues in order of their arrival. To my immediate left, at-large Councilor Anissa Sabi-George. To my far right, Councilor Lydia Edwards. To my left, Councilors Flynn, Councilor McCarthy, Councilor Baker, and Councilor Campbell to my immediate right. Want to thank you all for coming to provide us with your testimony today. And with that, I will hand it over to Trish. Hi.
Thank you. Good afternoon, councilors. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come before you here today to talk about some of the great work currently underway with the Public Facilities Department and the BuildBPS initiative. I'm Tricia Lyons. I'm the director of the Public Facilities Department. With me today to my immediate left is Brian McLaughlin, our Chief of Staff. And next to Brian is Steve Bickerton, our Assistant Director for Planning and Management, who, among other things, manages our budget. To my right is Nate Cooter with the Boston Public Schools. He'll be, and his colleagues will be representing the BuildBPS Planning Initiative. John Hanlon is next to Nate, and Monica Roberts is on the end. I also have my senior management team with us in the gallery today, and I'd like to acknowledge them as well as all of our staff back at Court Street and on our job sites for their strong dedication to the work we do on behalf of Mayor Walsh and for the residents of our city. They're an incredibly committed bunch, and I am proud and fortunate to be associated with them. I'd also like to acknowledge our friends from the Office of Budget Management. I see Ira Kaplan, our budget analyst up there, and Jack Hanlon especially, who worked tirelessly to put this budget together and are tremendous partners in the implementation of our work. So again, thank you for this opportunity. I'll start by explaining a little bit about our organization, what we do, how we do it, and tell you a little bit about our staff. Then, with your indulgence, I'll run through a few highlights from our project caseload. And at that point, I'll turn our presentation over to Nate from BPS, who will give an overview of the BuildBPS initiative. And after that, we're happy to answer any questions you may have. So in terms of what we do, I'll start by differentiating what PFD does as compared to some of our sister agencies throughout the city, which can often be a point of confusion. PFD is responsible for managing planning, design, and construction projects at city-owned buildings. This is an important distinction and is what separates our work from the work of other municipal agencies. The Boston Planning and Development Agency, for example, is responsible for monitoring private development, including the Article 80 review process, as well as managing larger urban planning initiatives. The city's Department of Neighborhood Development is primarily responsible for housing initiatives and real estate management and disposition. The Public Works, Transportation, and Parks departments are responsible for non-building design and construction projects at bridges, roadways, and parks, respectively. Many of those are also funded through Mayor Walsh's capital plan. As I said, the Public Facilities Department manages design and construction projects on city-owned buildings that are funded through Mayor Walsh's capital plan. Under his currently proposed FY20 to 24 capital plan, we're responsible for delivering roughly 37% of the $2.78 billion value of the plan, or just around $1 billion. These projects are in every neighborhood of the city, and we partner with a large number of city departments like the Boston Public Schools, Boston Centers for Youth and Families, the Boston Public Library, all of the sort of first responder agencies, and many others, managing capital projects on their behalf, making sure they're built to a high quality, are on time, and on budget. Our typical projects are delivered in one of two ways, both options strictly adhering to public procurement laws relating to our work. One method is called design, bid, build. That is regulated through the Mass General Laws, Chapter 149. Under that scenario, which typically encompasses most of our work, we'll play a role in assisting user agencies and the Office of Budget Management in defining the scope and budget for a project being considered for inclusion in the capital plan. Some projects require deeper programming or siting analysis before starting design, and others can bypass that effort. Upon appropriation of funding, and after the study is complete, PFD begins the process of selecting and hiring a designer that is also governed through public procurement requirements. Once the designer is selected and a contract is negotiated and executed, the design process begins. Depending on the size and complexity of the project, design can typically take anywhere from 1 year to 18 months, possibly even up to 2 years to complete. And again, depending on the project, public meetings to get community input and feedback occur during the design process. Upon completion of the design, the projects will be publicly bid for construction. PFD is required by law to hire the lowest eligible and responsible bidder to perform the construction. Once the bid has been accepted and the contract requirements are met, the contractor's work begins. At the end of construction, when all the work is done, the building is then turned back over to the user agencies for use and maintenance. These PFD projects, depending on their complexity, can take anywhere between 2 to 5 years on average from start to finish. The second method of project delivery is called construction management at risk, and that is regulated through the Mass General Laws, Chapter 149A. This method is used on our largest and most complex projects only, projects like the bowling building in Dudley Square, the Central Library renovation at Copley, the Dearborn STEM Academy in Roxbury, and the Boston Arts Academy currently in construction at in the Fenway. Although the basic path of project completion is similar, this method requires PFD to supplement our team with an owner's project management firm, and it also requires hiring the contractor during design to participate in the development of the design documents. The benefit of this method is that it encourages a more collaborative approach among the project participants, and it allows for early construction packages to move forward before the design is completed. It's a very complex delivery method and does require additional costs, but typically it results in a more coordinated delivery and a high-quality outcome. These projects, given their size and complexity, can take 5 to 6 years on average to complete. In terms of the department itself, we have 67 full-time positions, which includes 6 current vacancies. Our current staff of 61 members are all involved in one way or another in our project delivery process. The majority of our staff are design and construction professionals. Our project managers are responsible for project delivery from cradle to grave, as we say. Our design staff serve as internal resources, helping to ensure the highest quality designs. Our clerks of the works are our day-to-day on-site professionals who we call our eyes and ears on the projects as they get into construction. And we also have a number of support professionals who assist on the many tasks required on our projects, including procurement to contracting and legal services, paying bills, tracking progress. Essentially, every member of our department plays a role in our projects. Before you today is PFD's FY20 recommended operating budget totaling $7,169,689. This represents a 6% increase over the FY19 budget. As can often be expected from a service organization, just over 94% of our budget is allocated to personnel expenses, while just under 6% covers our typical operating expenses. The 6% increase over our FY19 budget is largely due to collective bargaining increases and the addition of 2 new positions, an assistant director position to support the increase in project management staff over the last few years and the increase in volume of our project caseload, which has risen to over $550 million with another $120 million slated to start over the next year. We also hope to add a project manager for studies position to increase our capacity to manage a large number of studies that are funded through the Mayor's Capital Plan. In terms of the types of projects we manage, they generally fall into 3 broad categories. Brand new buildings or ground-up construction and major renovations, projects like the Boston Arts Academy, where we're demolishing the old building and we'll be building a new school at the same site, or the East Boston Police Station, where we're building a new facility on a city-owned parcel at East Eagle Street, or the Dudley Library, where we're keeping the basic structure in place but are completely modifying and renovating the building. We also manage facility upgrades and infrastructure improvements. Examples of those include upgrades to the gym, community space, and teen center at the Mattahunt Community Center in Mattapan, upgrades to the program and living areas at the Woods Mullen Shelter. We've completed 1 phase and are designing a 2nd phase to improve the entry and security sequence, as well as installing an elevator and upgrading the restrooms and shower facilities. And the kitchen upgrades through the Boston Public Schools My Way Cafe program, where we're modifying spaces in our school buildings to accommodate the new fresh food initiative championed by Mayor Walsh. We also manage studies to identify programmatic needs for buildings and translate them into building and space requirements for future projects. Examples of those include the Fields Corner Branch Library study, where we're determining what might be needed to better meet the Boston Public Library's compass principles for the library itself, and are exploring the potential opportunity for a public-private partnership at the site as well. And we're also performing a study to determine the space requirements needed for a new emergency operations center and explore potential sites for that facility. PFD has had a busy and productive year in FY19. We've been able to complete a number of really great projects that have been very well received in our neighborhood communities. Some highlights include the Dearborn STEM Academy, which is setting a very high standard across the nation for STEM schools. We've renovated community centers and libraries that are always centerpieces in the hearts of our neighborhoods. We've continued to make progress on our schools infrastructure through the My Way Cafe Kitchens Upgrade Initiative and the Massachusetts School Building Authority Accelerated Repair Program that allows us to replace roofs, windows, and boilers on a fast-track method at our schools. And we've continued our progress on bringing some improvements to this building and the plaza, with much more to come over the next year and beyond. We've also got some really great projects underway and a number of exciting projects waiting to start. In the interest of time, I won't go through all of them, but we're including some highlights in the remaining slides. The Boston Public Library improvements are among our most popular and beloved projects. Mayor Walsh has made renovating our branches and the Central Library a cornerstone of the capital plan, and we're making significant progress, as you can see by the impressive list of highlights. These include the Dudley Square branch, which is under construction and slated to be complete this fall. The Roslindale and Adams branch libraries that are completing design and plan to start construction this year. And the Faneuil branch library for which we've just hired a designer and will begin designing in earnest in the next month or so. We've also got an incredible number of school projects underway and waiting to start through the Mayor's BuildBPS program. Excuse me. I know we'll dedicate some time in this hearing to discuss the program in detail, so I won't spend too much time on these projects. But as you can see, we have some significant projects underway that will be completed for the next school year, like the Elliott School at 585 Commercial Street in the North End. That's a $19 million renovation of a former commercial building on the North End waterfront. That, combined with the Salem Street building that was completed last year, will represent a nearly $43 million investment over the last few years in 2 of the 3 buildings that make up the Elliott School campus. We're also completely transforming the Sumner Schoolyard in Roslindale, which, combined with a window replacement project in 2017 and a boiler replacement this summer through the MSBA's Accelerated Repair Program, will have allowed us to complete nearly $5 million worth of investments in that school over the last 2 years. And along with the Sumner, we will also have new boilers installed at East Boston High, the O'Donnell School, the Tobin School, and we'll have new windows installed at the Marshall School under the Accelerated Repair Program this summer. And we'll also have 30 more kitchens upgraded under the My Way Cafe Fresh Food Initiative, which will bring the total number to 55 buildings over the last 2 summers. Mayor Walsh is also making significant investments in our police, fire, and EMS facilities. We'll be getting into construction this summer on Engine 42 in Roxbury, which will be the first new fire station built in the city in more than 25 years. It's been designed to incorporate the Boston Fire Department's new health and wellness initiative for its firefighters. We've already begun the work to temporarily relocate the fire services nearby so that we can reconstruct the new building on the existing site. We'll also be completing a $4.4 million renovation at Engine 50 in Charlestown, which will also incorporate BFD's program for health and wellness. In addition, as I previously mentioned, for the Boston Police Department, we will begin construction this summer for a new police station at East Eagle Street in East Boston. We're also working on our municipal buildings. We're continuing to improve this building, City Hall and its plaza. We're in the early stages of design for renovations that will improve the plaza, making it more welcoming and active, providing accessibility throughout the plaza and the building entrances, including opening up the north entrance once again to the public. We'll also be providing plug-and-play architecture for power and data to support a wide variety of programming on the plaza. And we'll also be creating accessibility throughout the plaza. We are also continuing our proactive repairs to the historic Faneuil Hall, and we're working on some much-needed improvements to the office facility at Court Street. And we're also underway with some great projects for the Boston Centers for Youth and Families in the Parks facilities. We'll be in construction this year on a renovation to the Paris Street Pool, which will complement the beautiful renovation to the Paris Street Community Center that was completed last year. We are also underway with design for a major renovation to the Curley Community Center in South Boston. And we are improving the Cassidy Fieldhouse in Brighton and are replacing the roof and adding a very nice outdoor patio to the golf clubhouse at Franklin Park. And beyond our project management, we are also partnering with many of our sister agencies on various major program initiatives. We're working with the Environment Department and the Office of Budget Management on the Renew Boston Trust program that focuses on energy efficiency improvements at city-owned buildings. We're working on a $10 million pilot project at 14 buildings right now and are beginning discussions about expanding the program to a second phase encompassing more buildings and energy conservation measures. The next phase will be a larger project with a targeted budget of $35 million. We are also working with the Environment Department and other agencies on the Climate Action Plan update. Our intent is to understand at a more detailed level what we as a city need to do to our buildings to meet the mayor's commitment to carbon neutrality in 2050. And we're also working with the Mayor's Office of Recovery Services and the Health and Human Services Cabinet on a master plan for a recovery campus on Long Island. We're coordinating with the Public Works Department, who's managing the project to replace Long Island Bridge. Our master plan will articulate a vision for the campus, determine the service needs that will be accommodated on the island, and will propose a service model and implementation plan for achieving that vision. And we're also focusing as an organization on improving our operations and our project delivery processes. We're currently partnering with the Public Works Department and the Parks Department to implement eBuilder project management software. We're incredibly grateful to Mayor Walsh for investing in our departments by providing a tool that will better allow us to provide consistency in our project delivery process, will give our project managers the tools they need to more effectively manage their projects, and will give our management team data by which we can better measure and monitor our productivity and efficiency. We'll be piloting the program later this year and hope to be fully operational in the upcoming months. And finally, we're also partnering with the Boston Public Schools to assist, advise, and implement the projects being identified through the BuildBPS initiative. I mentioned a few of the projects that we're currently working on through this program, but at this time, I'd like to turn this presentation over to Nate Cooter, the Deputy Chief Financial Officer from BPS, who can provide an overview of the program status.
Hey, excuse me one second, Trish. Sure. What I'm going to try to do is do the first round with just PFD.
Okay.
And then as many rounds as we need to do PFD, if you guys don't mind. I think that way will flow a little easier. And let me acknowledge we've been joined by Councilor Josh Sakam as well as Councilor Kim Janey. So if you don't mind, we're going to go with the 5 minutes each councilor, and I'm going to start with Councilor Sabi George.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation, at least the first half of it. Look forward to the rest of it. One of the changes that's fairly new to us here in the city is your department, Tricia, taking over a lot of the efforts of BPS's facilities department. Can we talk about the impact that that's made on your work and on any savings that we maybe have realized or efficiencies we've realized?
Well, I think it's more related to the anticipated increase, and certainly we're seeing that increase in the number of projects that that we're seeing through the BuildBPS program. There's a significant number of sites that we are addressing, both for infrastructure improvements, kitchen upgrades, and major projects that we anticipate not slowing down, frankly. And the staff that migrated over to the Public Facilities Department are supplementing our team and our ability to manage an increased caseload and an expected increased caseload down the road. It will provide for a more consistent delivery of school projects going forward. The Boston Public Schools still has, sort of maintenance responsibilities, and there are projects associated with that, and that falls under John Hanlon's group in the operations department. And so there's still work being done through BPS, but the major capital projects and infrastructure projects are being managed through PFD.
Right. And then one of the projects that you mentioned is the My Way Cafe and the investments that we're looking to make over the next school year that we've made so far through facilities. Can you talk a little, I'm a little confused about our investment or the degree that we're investing resources and funding for the My Way Cafe and the involvement of private foundation dollars in that work.
Excuse me.
That's fine. If that's something that we can, I mean, this is only our third hearing so far.
Yeah.
So we've got time if okay. That could be addressed in a future hearing, whether it's through a different department or through BPS at another time, that would be fine with me.
Okay. I wouldn't want to speak to the division of the funding because I'm not 100% sure of it.
And so
we'd be
my
happy to
question
provide
through the
that with
chair
you.
for future clarification is, with this investment, the $5 million this year, the investment that we made last year, I'm curious about the sort of the balance in those resources with private dollars versus what we're investing as a school system or as a city. Then my last question for this round is on Long Island. This has been an ongoing effort on behalf of the city. We're all on the same team trying to get this work done. I know that we've hit road bumps. We have previously planned for some of this funding for the bridge, for the replacement and the future work down the road. Can you talk a little bit about the timeline now and the work that lies ahead and the associated funding with that work lying ahead?
Sure. So the Public Works Department, as you know, is managing the replacement of the bridge, and they're going through a very robust permitting process for that. The last milestone or expectation I heard is that the hope is to have the bridge operational in 2021. From public facilities standpoint, we are working with the Office of Recovery Services and HHS to master plan the island in anticipation of having services on that island when the bridge opens up, so that people, as they drive across that bridge, have places to go to get the services they so richly need and deserve. The master planning process is underway. We've hired consultants, a team of consultants that include both architects and engineers, as well as recovery services specialists. It will be a very robust master plan. We anticipate that it will take probably a year to complete, sometime next summer. I think we're looking at completing it.
And a year to complete your master planning process, or the improvements that need to happen on the island for the programming to be successful or to take place?
So a year to complete the master planning process. That would involve probably a 4-phased approach where we sort of establish a vision for the campus, then come up with some options for service delivery and service models, and then talk a little bit about what work needs to be done to the facilities on the island to accommodate those services, and finish up with cost estimating and an implementation plan. I imagine that the renovations to the buildings, since they've been vacant for some time, may take a little time, but we would certainly try to work our plan to, sort of accelerate the spaces that we can make available as quickly as possible, and then work our way toward a master plan.
And I imagine you've done some sort of audit to check the current status of those buildings to see what could come online sooner than something else that needs.
That is correct. We hired a team of architects and engineers to evaluate each of the 17 buildings out there on the campus, and we're in the process of reviewing finalized reports, and the condition analysis will be fed into the master planning process as we make decisions down the road.
Great. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Councilor Redwoods.
And I wanted to thank you so much for your work so far, especially in my district. I just wanted to make sure I understood your dates for your investments.
Sure.
So just confirming then for the Paris Street pool, it'll be this fall that you start the renovations?
That's correct.
Okay.
We anticipate starting construction.
And then it was for the East Eagle Police Station, the new site was going to start this summer?
Yes.
This summer, start
We're
constructing it.
currently pre-qualifying contractors to go out to bid for that work as well.
And what is your estimated timing on that? I know you said it's 2 to 5 years for some of your projects.
Yeah, so, excuse me, I
It's
can't
okay.
remember.
We don't have to get
all of them.
that granular right now. I just wanted to make sure I was clear on at least the starting times for both of them. It's okay.
You sure?
Yeah, we can
Okay.
follow up on that. I'm just
Sorry
happy
about
that they're
that.
starting both this year. Just to make sure I understood, and I apologize if I stepped out when you were just explaining the new animal shelter program. There's an investment.
There is a project that is being funded to study the animal shelter and define programmatic requirements
Okay.
for either a new shelter or renovations to the existing. That process will need to sort of to take hold before we make any decisions.
I can't help but commend you 1,000 times over for taking that leadership. I think we're finding an increasing amount of animals, and that's a good thing, they're part of our families, but a lot of them, not all pet owners are as responsible as we'd like them to be, and we're finding an increased amount of loose animals and cats and dogs that need to be at least cared for or at least accounted for. So I really do appreciate this investment and this initiative, and at least studying the issue so we can figure out how to really make sure we have the most responsible system for our pets and family members. So thank you so much for that. I wanted to follow up very briefly on the questioning of my colleague about Long Island. So in your visioning, or in the city's vision thus far for this campus, and I understand the politics behind, how, when, and timing, so I'm not going to ask about that. But in terms of the vision and funding and paying for it, is there an expected private-public partnership with this? I only ask that because what I'm seeing consistently is due to the lack of funding from the federal government, to decreased funding from the state, we are finding that we have, at least with housing, had to bring in some private dollars to help build out some of the units at market rate to help to pay for the public use. So do you anticipate in this vision also having a private-public partnership? Would that, if so, would it involve some housing units? Would it, how would this be funded?
It's a little too early in the process for me to speculate. It is an exercise that the master plan will contemplate and really look at financing models. To my understanding, we're not looking at a private, sort of housing investment or private use on the island. It's strictly, our focus is strictly on a recovery campus, and whether that involves some of our recovery services providers or not, I'm just not sure. But we will be analyzing that through the master plan.
Thank you. And so this is, I thought your first slide was very, very helpful in helping me understand where to direct my questions. And so I won't be directing a good chunk of them towards you because you told me where I should go here. But educate me more. There's two projects that I know are in my district, and they are city buildings, but because they're becoming privately owned, maybe educate me now about the Desaro Center. That process, is that with you guys, or because it's going to one day be RFP'd out? I know that because you didn't mention in the process the vote that happens here to surplus, so I might be confusing processes.
Probably not. It does get a little bit mixed at some level. The Public Facilities Department is finishing up a programming and siting study for a new North End Community Center.
Which we're very excited about.
Yes, we have a meeting on Thursday night to present to the community, and
Yes.
hopefully everyone will be thrilled. The recommendation will move the services away from the existing Nazaro Center because it's simply not big enough to handle the program as desired for
I
the
know.
community. So the disposition of the Nazaro Center will go on its own process. There's a lot of conversation that will have to be had in terms of what that building becomes. That typically gets managed through the Department of Neighborhood Development. I'm assuming
it's
that
going
that
to
building will be
D&D.
surplus to D&D.
Okay.
And then a whole process of determining what its future use will.
And just a clarifying question. So surplusing, and that means it's no longer going to be used directly by the city, so therefore it's not in your department anymore?
So the Public Facilities Department doesn't have care and custody of any buildings. The Boston Centers for Youth and Family actually have care and custody of the existing Nazaro Center.
Right.
If there is determined to be some sort of use for Boston Centers for Youth and Families, I assume that that building will not be surplused. If it's determined that there's a higher and better use for the building, either for another city program or something else, housing or something, that would go through another process,
So
more
just
than likely through D&D.
So just like the East Boston Library on Meridian Street, that big building is kind of going through its process and it's getting gutted and it's going to be used for community use?
Okay.
Is that,
Are you referring to the old Barnes Library?
no, the
There's
barn, the
another
Barn School is senior center.
Yes, exactly.
But I'm talking about the one on Meridian Street, the large library.
Okay.
We got a new library in East Boston, but
Right.
the larger one, there was a large one there. I can follow up. I
So
just want to make
I'm
sure.
assuming that went through some sort of
Okay.
other process through perhaps D&D
Okay.
for development.
Okay. Thank you.
I apologize, I don't know the
No, that was extremely helpful.
project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me acknowledge that we've been joined by Councilor Michael Flaherty. Chair recognizes Councilor Ed Flynn.
Thank you, Councilor CMO, and thank you to the panelists for being here today. And thank you, Tricia, for your input, for your leadership on this issue and other issues across our city. We greatly appreciate your work. I've read about the program study for the Chinatown Library, so I know that is greatly appreciated in the community after they haven't had a library in 50 years. So I want to thank Mayor Walsh and his team for working hard to work with the community on locating and eventually building a library. So that's great news for our community. And Tricia, could you give us a little update on the Curley Community Center in South Boston? I know it's ongoing. Progress is being made, but what's the latest on it? I know the city is committed to this recreation facility, but what's the latest that you have on the Curley?
Sure, Councilor. We are, as you know, we're just starting design on the renovations to the facility. We hit a little bit of a block in early design, given that it's a very large building on the waterfront, and with the concerns of rising sea levels, there was some initial concerns about how we handle building resilience into a building of that nature. And so our design team went through a little bit of a study and a charrette involving lots of folks from our environment department and other experts to see if we could devise some possible interventions that could allow us to continue with the renovation. And I'm pleased to say that I think that we do have some solutions that will allow us to invest I believe it's $15 million that the mayor has allocated to the project. And so we anticipate continuing on with that design process and in the hopes of getting into construction sometime next year.
Yeah, thank you for that update. I know, just generally speaking, maybe you could reference the Curley Community Center as well, but what role would ADA compliance and access to our disabled have on your thinking as it relates to projects that we need to make sure that all residents have equal access to all of our facilities? Any just general comments on that?
Sure. Essentially, every project that we manage is designed through that lens, and to the extent possible, we try to provide for as much access as we can in the buildings. This is an exciting opportunity, particularly for the Curley Community Center, because not only will we be providing access into the building, depending on what our entrance or entrances look like, but as you know, we'll be reconfiguring the interior of the building, and that will be required to meet accessibility codes as well. So we'll be providing greater access in that building.
Here's my last question. Will those in wheelchairs have access to the beach part of the Curley Recreation Center? And would you have to work with with the mayor's office of the Commission on Disabilities as well? Or how would that factor in?
I think that's something that we would sort of work with the Disabilities Commission as well as the Boston Centers for Youth and Families to talk about what the options are in that regard. Some of them may be simple equipment purchases that would require the staff out there to manage. Some may require building interventions, but we'll determine that during the design as well.
And my last question, if I may, Mr. Chairman, can you give an update, although it's not in my district, I know they provide excellent education for our special education, special needs students, the Cauda School. What's the latest with the Cauda School?
Well, we're very excited about the Cauda School. Maybe I'll let Brian.
Thank you, Tricia. So with the Cauda School, we just reached a major milestone with the Mass School Building Authority 2 weeks ago. They voted to move the project into their capital pipeline, which allows us to move forward to bring on an owner's project manager and architect to start the design of the actual future Cauda School. That bringing on the consultant team usually takes a few months. So over the next couple of months, we'll be working with the MSBA to make sure we have the right project team to move forward with this project in collaboration with BPS. So we're hoping to start the actual design, the educational programming and design of this probably in 4 to 6 months.
Councilor, I'm sorry, I'd just like to add that I noted that the Cauda School is very special to us. Just so that you know, the Public Facilities Department has sort of adopted the Cauda School as our partner for our One Boston Day days of service.
Okay.
And we've been doing it for about 4 years now. Principal Mark O'Connor is amazing. His staff is amazing. The students are amazing. And we're really very excited to work on this project at a very personal level.
Well, thank you for your great work, and thank you to the BPS staff that is also here on the Cauda School. I said earlier that a budget is a reflection of your values, and that's a real commitment to the students of Boston and the youth of Boston that have disabilities, is investing money into our students that really need it at the Cauda School. So I want to say thank you for that huge investment to the mayor's staff and to you as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Campbell.
Thank you, Councilor Siamo, and thank you guys for all that you do. Trish, Brian, Steve, you don't have easy jobs, so thank you. And clearly you're doing things at schools. I mean, it's nonstop. So I appreciate you guys and the work that you do. I don't have a lot of questions. Just to follow up on the My Way Cafe. I know we're still going to wait, I think, for the financial breakdowns of how the money is split between private and public dollars. But do we have a sense of the schools that are going to be participating in the second round of funding for that?
Yes. And
So just a brief
Or a
update.
list.
We were able to
Yep.
get the breakdown of the first year My Way Cafe. So last year we moved forward with 25 schools and with a total project budget of about $5 million. The private donations totaled $2 million of that $5 million, inclusive of equipment.
Inclusive of,
Equipment, a major part of the project cost was the actual equipment that was being brought into the kitchens.
And so the first phase included 25 schools, 10 of which were managed through BPS and 15 of which were bid through the Public Facilities Department. This second phase, I think I said 30 schools, but I believe it's 29 schools that will be addressed as well, 17 of which will be bid now, right? 17 of which will be bid through
Yes.
Public Facilities, and the rest will be managed by Boston Public Schools. The schools lists are long. If it would be helpful, we could provide those lists after the hearing.
that would be great. Do we know how those schools were selected for the Phase 2? Oh, is that you, John?
I think I should turn
I
that
can
one
wait for the
over
next.
to,
I can wait for the next
BPS.
round. to-
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Council Baker.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks.
Tricia, are we talking about the property management department also?
we are not.
We're not, okay. Okay.
They're a partner, but
Yeah,
separate agency.
That isn't permanent employees, that has nothing to do with what I'm seeing here, it's not
No.
that. Can you talk a little bit about the libraries, which I'm very happy about Adams Corner Library, but the Upham's Corner program study, can you explain to me what that process is gonna look like? Like, is DSNI a partner in on that side of the street? I know Citizens Bank and some of those parcels. Is DSNI a partner in on the Strand, the Upham's Corner? Because that, to me, correct me if I'm wrong, looks like one sort of parcel from the Strand all the way over to where the proposed library is going to be. Can you kind of just give me a quick how that process is going to play out? And is DSNI involved in that?
So this is, again, one of those really confusing projects.
That's why I'm asking about it, Tricia.
Because, but in terms of the management of the process as well, the RFP process for the development is being managed through the Department of Neighborhood Development in partnership with the Office of Economic Development, I believe. Public Facilities is playing a role with the Boston Public Library to sort of define the needs for the library. It's still a little bit unclear as to how the project will be delivered, whether it would be built by a developer down the road or if it will be built by the city in totality. If it's built by a developer, I'm imagining a process where a developer would give the city sort of a shell of a building, and then we would work with the library department to build that shell out into the library itself. Right now, we are working with the library department to do sort of a typical library programming study like we've done with the other projects as well. That will give us the opportunity to either, if we were to build it ourselves, just sort of go forward in design and build the building like we normally do. Or if we end up working with a developer, sort of be able to give them our needs and our wants and work with them to ensure that the library's needs are met.
Yeah, so now is that, because we're talking library, but that parcel to me looks like it stretches all the way over this, will they be separated? Will it be Strand RFP, library RFP? Because also there's talk about, and I would love to see it happen, residential above that library, hopefully, elderly housing up there. Are we far along enough in the process to know what that's going to look like?
I think that would be a better question for the folks at D&D.
D&D.
We're not as involved in that development scenario,
Yep.
so I wouldn't want to speculate.
Yeah, okay. So we'll wait till D&D and see how that process plays out. the firehouse up on Meeting House, can we talk about that a little bit? Have we worked it out with the church? Are we going to build on that church parking lot there? Do you have a sense of how that's going to play out
So right now,
up at Meeting House?
that would be engine 17.
Yeah.
And right now, there is no intent to build on any other site than where the fire station is located.
Okay.
And we're in design now.
So we were unable to come up with a deal with the church there?
We were not.
Okay. So what happens with operations there when will they just disperse to other houses and cover from there?
So that's something that we'll have to work out in design. For engine 42, we were able to find a location where we could build a temporary sort of fire station that they could relocate to, that's in close proximity to where they are now, which will allow us to demolish the existing building and build new, and then they'll move back in when the project is done.
Okay.
I would anticipate something similar for engine 17, but it's a little too early to tell.
Yeah. And in new projects for FY20, you have a Dorchester and Charlestown Community Center study. Is that Dorchester District 3 Dorchester or District 4 Dorchester?
Steve, are you familiar with
I don't think the council district was defined, but it came from discussions around most of the community centers in Dorchester are part of a school.
Yeah.
And not a standalone facility, so there's BCYF talked about a need for a standalone facility in Dorchester.
So that's what I'm getting at. The Leahy Holleran does fabulous work, and they have to share the pool with Latin School, and so I've been pushing for a study on a standalone, I'll be done in 1 second, Mr. Chair, a standalone building for the Leahy Holleran, and I was just wondering if that ask has finally come to fruition here by a study for that. So if maybe Brian or Vic, you can do some follow-up on that for me.
Sure, we can definitely
Thank you.
do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor McCarthy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. A lot of the questions I had were regarding the Long Island stuff, so I'll leave that as we get further deep. But Trish, thank you and your staff. District 5 is well taken care of, and I appreciate that. The Rosnell Library is a long time coming. That getting done is a big step, as well as the Mattahunt is taking a bit of a beating as of lately. The money sunk into there is going to be really appreciated in my Mattapan neighborhood. A couple questions regarding the Hyde Park neighborhood. I brought up the overall budget, the police academy. Are we thinking about building a new one at some point in time? And my explanation earlier was very simple, is, you know, our police force is aging, and in the next 3, 4, 5 years, we're going to age out a lot of Boston police officers, and the grammar school that they now train in simply is not large enough, and really, it's that's a police academy that should be used for like Nantucket, not for Boston, and it should be redone and rebuilt at some point in time. Is there any thoughts in the future of rebuilding that?
So I think that might be a question I would have to defer to the police, Boston Police Department.
Okay. Well, they're going to say yes.
There is, absolutely. And we'd be happy to build it.
Yeah.
There isn't currently a project on our caseload to address that.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's in Hyde Park, and the neighbors up in Fairmount love having them there, talk about security.
Yeah.
But it's time. I mean, you know, they need a bigger space. So that's my other first question. And my second question would be, it's more of a statement. I see we're sinking more money into City Hall. Is there any thoughts of getting rid of this cinder block with curtains, or are we're stuck here? This is where it's going to be?
We are not stuck. We are going to convince people to love this building.
Okay.
Good luck with that.
Put that in the budget. It's going to take a lot of convincing for me. That's it. I look forward, you know, this is the overview budget. I'm not going to get into any detailed questions now, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks over the next couple of weeks. But I really appreciate what you've done, and the mayor's administration has done for District 5 over the last 6 years. We're in very good hands as we're spending, you know, little north of $36 million in District 5 in capital. Very thankful for myself and my constituents. Thank you.
And thank you for your partnership as well, Councilor.
Thank you. Councilor Janey.
So much, Mr. Chair, and certainly want to thank the team for being here today. Want to thank Councilor Flint for your questions on the Cauda School, and thank you for your dedication to the Cauda School, which is in my district. So I really appreciate that. I know a lot of questions were asked about Long Island. just wanted to follow up. I think it was Councillor Edwards that asked about the funding, public versus private. What about other municipalities? Is anyone else stepping up to the plate, or is this just all Boston?
I'm not that familiar with it in terms of the financing aspects. As I mentioned, we sort of are still in the very early stages of even defining what the campus wants to be and what services will be offered there. I'd probably have to defer that question to the Office of Recovery Services or Health and Human Services.
No worries. In terms of the Dudley Library, which I'm super excited about seeing, each day I can see new work being done. The exterior windows are starting to come up, and it's looking great over there. 17 million, how much was it? I couldn't find it. I saw it earlier. I think it was 17.4.
17 and change.
17.2.
0.2.
Right.
17.2. So that's significant, and certainly love seeing that. You know, one thing that's very important to me as we look at these projects, and $17.2 million is a lot of money, is looking at who is getting to do that work. And so how much of that work, and you may not be prepared here, obviously, and it's not part of your department, but it is certainly something that we, I think, as a city have to be mindful of in terms of making sure that all of the projects that the city is leading is in compliance with the Boston Residents' Jobs Policy.
Right.
Do you have any of that data with you today?
I do have the latest numbers on the projects, and I have
Wonderful.
it because this has been
Because you know I'm going to ask that question.
I knew you were going to ask this question, but it's also been very high on our priority list since this project got underway, frankly.
Thank you. Because the Vine Street, which again, my project, it's wonderful, it's beautiful. I was just at an event there last week. I had my Easter egg hunt over the weekend. The young dancers from Vine Street came and performed, wonderful, but really missed the mark in terms of making sure that those jobs went to Boston residents, people of color, and women. And it got on my radar. You know, the job was already done by the time, you know, I got into office. And was able to kind of monitor that job. But I've been paying close attention to Dudley Library. And since we have been monitoring that, we saw an uptick in numbers, but still not where we need to be. But I'd love to hear your update if you have some of those numbers.
As I think I mentioned to you maybe last year, when the contractor started on this project, or won the bid, frankly, it was a new contractor to us, and we knew that they weren't as familiar with doing business in Boston and certainly in Dudley Square. We pulled them in, frankly, and said that these efforts are real, and you are going to be expected to make your best efforts at meeting these numbers. And we even gave them a chance to sort of withdraw from the project, but they sort of pulled their bootstraps up and said, you know, we're ready, we're gonna do our best. They, true to our word and to your efforts and the Boston Employment Commission's efforts and the small and local business efforts, they've kind of been held to their word, or at least been made to put their best faith effort in. And I think that they've shown some good effort. They're not meeting their numbers yet, but they're working toward them. The latest numbers that I've seen were that they were only at 30% Boston residents, which is concerning. They are at 50% minority and 4% women. So the residents and women numbers we could do better on, or they could do better on. And so we're consistently reminding them that it's an important part of the work that they do here in Boston.
And I appreciate that, and I think it's important that they hear it from everyone. So it's important that you guys are holding them accountable, as well as myself and others in the community who are monitoring the numbers as well. And that being said, like I said earlier, there has been an increase, which is great since we started to pay attention. One of the things that I've noticed across the board is that many of the projects are struggling with residents, and I wonder how much of that is due to people being forced to look outside of the city for housing now and are not in this, people who used to be in the city are now outside of the city, but they're still doing work in the city. I hear the buzzer going off, so I will limit my time, but I appreciate the work that you're doing, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Flaherty.
That would be the Parks
Okay.
Department.
So I'll leave that for them. The East Boston Police Station, obviously renovations anticipated. What's the plan for the existing facility?
I'm not sure that there is a plan that I'm aware of. The new building will be built on the East Eagle
Yep.
Street site.
Yeah,
I
familiar
don't-
with,
I don't
familiar
know
with
if
any, but
there's
I
a
would make a
plan.
suggestion. I spent time there as an assistant district attorney in East Boston, and there was no place to house the district attorney's office, so I would encourage your conversation with our new Suffolk County District Attorney to see whether or not that's an acceptable location for their office. Nothing worse than having to arraign someone for, using a machete, and then he gets released on bail, and then you'd have to walk through him down at, by Jeffrey's Point to get to the office where the DA's office is. So there could be a good location. There's a lot of synergy because the courthouse is right there. So the courthouse is, technically, it's attached to the police station for obvious reasons. And if the police, they're going to go up to the East Eagle Street, if they're going to move up there, then that's going to leave that space vacant.
Right.
And if we're going to repurpose that, I would just ask that a conversation happen with the district attorney's office. Just makes some sense to give them either right of first refusal or maybe some type of partnership would result in positive space there. A quick snapshot on the Elliott School on Commercial Street, just an update as to how those renovations are coming, and then and then maybe this is more of a school issue, what will the total school population be when the renovations are done? Will we be able to add seats to that great, thriving Elliott School?
I would be very happy to take on the first part of your question, and perhaps our friends at Boston Public Schools can answer the second part. We are progressing very well with the renovation of the school. We anticipate being ready for September, September opening.
Good. Fall. And then same shift over to the Boston Arts Academy. Again, that's a jewel of our public school fleet. We were all over there at the groundbreaking not too long ago. So what's the anticipated date of completion of that project?
So if you went over there now, you wouldn't see the old building there anymore, so
Yeah.
that's already down. And 2021, so 2021, the school year 2021.
2020. And how is the temporary location, how is that working out?
I think it's working out okay.
No
Yeah.
issues to date? Awesome, very good. What's that? Yeah, sure. Very good, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilor Savi George, do you have anything?
I don't have anything on this section, thank you.
Councilor Edwards? No? Anybody? Anybody? Frank? Council Baker?
Tricia may have already answered this. You guys were doing the inventory for Long Island. How far along are we almost ready to report out on that? Where are we?
We are. The final reports are coming in. There's, with 17 buildings, they're sort of coming in dribs and drabs a little bit, but they're under review, and we anticipate by this summer we should have finalized reports on all of the buildings out there.
The end of the summer. Are there any of them that we're going to be able to go right into, you think?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I would venture to say probably not, but there may be some that require less work than others.
Yeah, they're all going to need something,
They
but
will all need
depending on.
something, I imagine.
Tricia, in your contracted services, back in 18, they were at 311,000, then they went down to 160. First of all, what are your contracted services? What are they? And why was that? What did we do in 18 that had us up that high? Do you recall?
Counselor, a big chunk of that was we were carrying about $75,000 or $100,000 for BPS, BuildBPS communications.
Oh, okay.
That was a big chunk of it.
That's when the transfer, that's when you took.
Correct.
In what are the contracted? What are we contracting there for 163,000?
Well, it's a variety of services that we use as part of our operation, including training for staff, maintenance we pay a share of the maintenance of the building in Court Street. We pay for maintenance of the elevators, trash removal, security services, cleaning services, things like that. So that makes up probably about 90% of that number.
Okay. Good to hear your voice, Vic.
Great to be here.
Yeah. I'm good, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Councilor Seymour. Trish, I just had one follow-up question
It's not you.
as it relates to the communication you have with, whether it's ISD or the fire department, as it relates to the fire codes, making sure that all of our city buildings are safe and up to date, and public safety is certainly always a concern. But what's overall, just what are your thoughts about our fire code, and how can we continue to work together to make sure that we have the best system possible?
So I think we've got a pretty good relationship with both the fire department and inspectional services with regard to our projects. I can't speak to the overall conditions in all of the city buildings, but as we sort of renovate buildings or build new buildings, we're, sort of just naturally required to meet all fire codes and building codes, and oftentimes we'll be able to work with the fire department or with the inspectional services department to sort of answer questions and try to make sure that we're doing the best job possible for life safety and healthy environments in our buildings.
When we, just as a brief follow-up, when we invest funding into a city building, do we always make sure that the fire code issues are addressed as part of the funding that's going into a particular building? Since we're doing the funding, do we also ensure that the building is up to code or has the best fire safety equipment we can?
It's a little bit of a nuanced response to that. The fire department reviews sort of all of the plans that we put together, and depending on the level of renovation, there are different requirements for the building systems, fire systems and whatnot to be addressed. To whatever extent we are required or are funded to meet, we will meet those standards in every project that we deliver.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move on to BuildBPS, I was just wondering, PFD's project management team is, I just want to verify this, Trish. Faneuil Library, PFD is overseeing that. Brighton High School locker rooms.
We will be overseeing that.
Police station work, D14 windows and such. And I think that would be it. The rest would be parks and public works. Okay, great. And I need to probably connect with you offline regarding Faneuil.
Okay.
Okay, great, thanks. So with that, I'm sorry, Councilor Flaherty, go ahead.
A question, and picking up on Councilor Flynn, on the Curly Recreational Center there. It's obviously the most heavily visited, thus the most heavily used community center in the entire city. You had mentioned that it was moving along and then sort of hit a little bit of a wall with respect to sort of climate resiliency stuff. I guess, so what is the result of that delay? More importantly, what additional funds will be coming to the Curly in order to address that? One of the concerns the community has is that there's been an appropriation made that goes into sort of the bones of the building, if you will. If there's going to be additional cost to protect it out front, we're going to need to know that in advance so we could add to those funds. So I want to get your thoughts on that. So whatever it's going to cost to make, there was a delay, whatever the cost associated with that delay, that needs to be in addition to what was already promised to the Curly community.
And it's unclear what the impacts of the solutions to protect the building are in terms of monetarily, in terms of the design, because the design hasn't really progressed enough to really understand the costs. So our strategy is to sort of continue with the design of the project, really understand the solutions, and there's time, I think, between the design and when the construction needs to hit to come back to the council next year if we do decide that we need additional
And I think it was through the chair, I think it was wise to take a pause to see what, if any, of those impacts, because the last thing we want to do is to renovate and make it renovate the facility, and then only to see that thing, the parts of the building up on 7th Street. So totally get it. But I want to make sure that if there's going to be additional expenditures made, that we're not going to sort of nickel and dime around what's already there. That needs to be a completely different discussion. I think the folks down there, again, because it's the most heavily visited and heavily used, folks down there have been waiting a long time. It's been neglected. There's been patchwork here and there. We've all been through the facility. We know the condition of the facility, but that's been because that's been years of neglect, quite frankly, or patching and painting as opposed to sort of a major overhaul. So you now have a front row seat to that, and I just want to make sure that as we're moving forward, I think it was more than appropriate to take a TV timeout, get the facts around the resiliency piece of it. Now, if we need to make adjustments to that, and if we need to reach out to secure some additional state and federal funds, I know we have partners that are willing to do that as well. So, but we'll be deferring to you on that, but I want to make sure that the money that's been pledged and appropriated for the bones of that building are not going to be, sort of supplementing some other action plan out front. I think that needs to be on a separate trajectory.
Okay.
Thank you, Trish. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So with that, we'll turn to BuildBPS.
Thank you very much. I think Carrie's about to help us out with the presentation here. As I get started, I just wanted to just thank Tricia and her team for the partnership that they've had with us over the last few years, especially really strengthening the relationship between the Public Facilities Department and the Boston Public Schools. One of the ways that we've really noticed that uptick in the partnership is the increase in capital projects where we've been able to leverage the Mass School Buildings Authority. In the years prior to 2014 and prior, we had only leveraged about $5.9 million in Mass School Building Authority funding for the Boston Public Schools. Since that time, 2015 and beyond, we've leveraged over $115 million in Mass School Building Authority. I think that's a testament to the work that they've done to partner with us and to help us really get the best bang for the taxpayer dollar and to help improve our school facilities. We came to the council in late February, I think on the 25th, and did a full presentation on BuildBPS. So in the interest of getting to your questions, I won't spend too much time, but we wanted to provide you with a brief overview of our plan and show how the FY20 planned capital spending will align to the BuildBPS plan that we rolled out in the fall. And I want to apologize on behalf of our colleague Monica Roberts, who is the Chief Engagement Officer. She had another engagement back at the bowling building and had to leave, but if you have any questions that we can't answer, we'll bring it back to her and get you the answers. As we've shown before, the BuildBPS plan, we've organized this in 5 key categories of projects. The purpose of these categories is to help the public engage in terms of the scope of the projects, how big each of the projects will be, and the length of time. Tricia, earlier in her presentation, showed you that for major capital projects, they have longer timelines, somewhere between 2 and 5 years, 2 and 6 years. That aligns to the categories on the left, the new builds and majors expansions. You guys have all aware of the Elliott School project, which is a major expansion, and the Dearborn project, which is a full knockdown and rebuild. These are the types of projects that are in this first category around new builds and expansions. Those are long-term projects. They have a significant impact on the learning environment and the communities, but they take a lot more planning to launch. Over the 10 years, we're going to launch 5 new projects in this category to complement the 4 projects that are currently in the pipeline in this category. The second bucket is the real estate management. This is the acquisition or disposition of properties so that we can start thinking about our portfolio overall and be proactive. We're partnering with the Boston Planning and Development Agency to do more tightly coordinated work to understand what parcels may be available, what properties may be available that will benefit our students and work with them to identify projects going forward. The third category is the renovations and reconfigurations. This is how we think about using our existing building stock better and upgrading our facilities when we work in this category. The most notable project in this category that we've started is the McCormick. We've announced at the end of the next school year that the school facility will close, that we are working right now to identify a partnership, and then we're going to do a project to upgrade the facilities and open a 712 high school in that facility, partnering with the existing McCormick community. So that's this category. There are 6 existing standalone middle schools that will be the priority for this category over the next 10 years. So the left side of this slide are really the projects that are few and far between but have a significant impact on the communities. As I said, we're anticipating 12 projects in these categories over the next 10 years. So you'll hear about updates on an annual basis. The right side of the slide, these 2 categories, are those things that every school can expect over the BuildBPS plan. The first is the district-wide initiatives and investments. These are our efforts to upgrade and improve the educational, safety, and wellness environments for all of our schools, where we're doing things like upgrading security improvements, locks, and security cameras, the My Way Cafe, kitchen upgrades to provide better, healthy meals is in this category, and then our technology infrastructure constant refresh schedule. So this is our opportunity to really make our schools better learning environments for our students. And the final category are the capital repairs and maintenance. This is the bricks and mortar, the roofs, boilers, windows, masonry, the projects that are less exciting but necessary for maintaining our buildings and make sure that we have high quality buildings in the future. Next year, the capital plan calls for a nearly $70 million investment in the Boston Public School facilities through the capital plan. We're also leveraging $20 million in MSBA funding to bring the total spending to $90 million for next year. And this is the breakdown by those 5 categories that I just mentioned. There's $30 million that will be going into the existing new builds and expansions. You can see the list there for the Boston Arts Academy, Elliott, and Cauda School, which we've already talked a little bit about today. There's $100K in the plans for the design of the McCormick building. This is over the next year. While it's still, the McCormick is still operating as a middle school, we will be working with PFD and with the designers to start imagining what upgrades to the facility need to be done. I also want to note that in the capital plan, not in any specific bucket, is reserved for future projects. So that's $2 million to deal with projects that may come up over the next year or may supplement any existing project as we get further into, say, the design of the McCormick building. In terms of district-wide initiatives and investments, there's a planned $15 million investment, including the My Way Cafe Kitchen Phase 2. And the last category is $22 million in capital repairs. This is where we're also leveraging a lot of MSBA dollars to continue to do more roofs, boilers, and windows projects through the Accelerated Repair Program for the MSBA. The last thing I'll note before I turn it over to questions to the council is we try and look to balance our investments across each of the categories in a way that both advances our vision for what the Boston Public Schools can become through major projects like the Cauda School, and district-wide initiatives that upgrade the facilities, and also investing in the capital repairs that are necessary to maintain the current quality of our buildings. And so this just shows the relative balance across the projects, with no planned investments right now in terms of property acquisitions for FY20, and then the reconfigurations work is just really getting started with the McCormick project. So that was a very rapid overview of our capital project. At this point, I'll turn it over.
Thank you, Nate. Let me start it off. I guess I'll start with the easier one first. And probably to you, John, the My Way Cafe, the Gardner School in particular. How can you give me kind of an update on where that's at?
Yeah, we're working on the My Way Cafe rollout on a neighborhood-by-neighborhood basis, as has been mentioned before, and it's strictly based on need. One of the councilors' questions before was related to, how we're making decisions on which schools are getting them, and it's all based on need, in particular, 3 different factors: the opportunity index score of a neighborhood, which is the aggregate of the opportunity index score for all of the schools within that neighborhood, the percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged in the schools in that neighborhood, and the lunch participation rates in that neighborhood. We're very close to finalizing what we hope to be the rollout plan, not only for the 1920 school year, but for the years following that, and we can talk to you about that in the next few days as we try to finalize that.
Is the Shaw Family Foundation still involved with the Gardner and partnering with BPS to hopefully get it in place this school year? Are you looking at this school year, John?
I can't speak to whether the Shaw Family Foundation is involved with the Gardner in any way, shape, or form. They're certainly involved with us as we work through the rollout for My Way Cafe. I've been in touch with Principal Herman from the Gardner School as recently as a week and a half ago regarding all this, and I feel like we're in good footing to, again, finalize the plan going forward for all schools.
Is it still the issue of like the central kitchen or something? I think in our discussions, the reason it was kind of delayed was more because of the distribution mechanism you had in mind.
A couple different things, and this isn't specific to the Gardner School. This is specific to all schools who are looking to have this kind of a kitchen upgrade. Number one, even if you have what seems to be a decent kitchen facility, which the Gardner does, you oftentimes don't understand the level of construction work required to actually convert that facility into a true My Way Cafe site. And so you may have a seemingly, again, decent-looking kitchen that actually requires hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of work and plenty of time to be able to complete that work, which is where PFD has been able to come in so much for us in the last couple of years. Secondly, again, we're going neighborhood by neighborhood for a couple different reasons. Number one, this is a new approach to food service in these schools where we try to make sure that there's more management available to provide support to the food service workers and managers who are rolling out the new model at schools. Because of that, we try to go neighborhood by neighborhood so that there's more of that same practice in the local area, so that there's more management support, there's more sharing of practices, and there's less of, you've got a one-off school 3 neighborhoods away that just adopted it, and it sort of fractures the model that's in that neighborhood, if that makes sense. Secondly, from a financial perspective, and finances are very important in food nutrition services, that department has run a deficit for several years. We want to make sure that we leverage as many financial efficiencies as we can, and when you're working neighborhood by neighborhood, you're able to do that so as to cut down on the food distribution costs. That, again, sort of prevents us from going with one-off adoptions of the model in other neighborhoods.
So I guess we can follow up offline just to see if we can tighten up that timeline at some point. Great.
Yeah, and again, I had a very good conversation with Principal Herman. We've been able to sort of keep her in the loop in recent weeks as well, so I can talk to you about that offline as well.
Great. And then the Jackson Man, I know tonight is probably the first of many meetings, community meetings. It's with the Horace Mann folks tonight. Could you give me just the Reader's Digest version of what the initial, say, 6 to 12 months looks like for process?
I'll do my best to answer that in 2 parts. Number one, the educational experience at the Jackson Man should look no different over the next 6 to 12 months. If anything, it should be somewhat improved from a facilities perspective because we are investing about $750,000 in the building this summer. So that should provide a somewhat better experience in the building next year. Other than that, though, the experience itself over the next 6 to 12 months won't feel much different. However, there will be work with the community and certainly within our team on problem solving for the long-term locations for both the Horace Mann School for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing as well as the Jackson Mann Cauda 8.
Great. And I look forward to following up on those discussions, not only with the school department, but also with BPDA, the mayor's office, and other folks as we try to figure out the longer-term plan. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Councilor Asabi George.
Thank you again, and thank you first for your earlier presentation this year on BuildBPS, because I think that saves a lot of the questions that we'd have for today. I want to go back to the My Way conversation that was had in the earlier segment, and I know we talked about the $5 million for FY19 with $2 million coming from private. Do we know this year we're budgeting 5? Is there an additional? Do we know the additional dollar amount from the private funding for next school year or for next fiscal year?
I'm not aware of the number.
Nate looks like he might be looking it up.
And I misspoke, just one point of clarification earlier. The $2 million was on top of a donation of all the equipment.
Oh, on
So it
top
was-
of? Okay,
Yeah, on
that's
top
great.
of, not inclusive of.
That's great. I would be curious as to what that breakdown is for FY20, and we can wait for that for a future hearing. That's fine.
Just, Councilor,
Sure.
I don't believe we have that information just yet. I believe those are part of ongoing conversations
Great.
between us and the donor.
Great. I'd love to see that as we continue to expand My Way Cafe, those initial funding dollars that sort of prompted this effort, which is great, that those dollars are able to continue and that the funders are motivated to continue with that support. And, you know, for me, what I have is more, I suppose, more of a comment than a question on BuildBPS. I feel like a little bit of a broken record, but with our, with the slide with like the 5 categories of funding, sort of the longer term and the ongoing work, I really do feel that the ongoing work is what shouldn't come out of BuildBPS. That should come out of different capital spending and really take that $1 billion investment made by the administration, by the mayor, to invest in our schools. So it's not a question, it's simply a comment that I'll continue to say and share. But just thank you for your work. Thank you for both teams for being here today. I'm going to step out because I'm moderating a panel for the superintendent process, and I look forward to watching the rest of today's hearing on film. Thank you, or on whatever, digital, not film.
Thank you. Councilor Redwoods.
Thank you. I just had a couple questions, and I do agree. Well, first, I want to thank you again for the earlier hearing on BuildBPS. It was extremely helpful. It's made a lot of this very streamlined. So I'll just get to some direct questions. One, I actually recently had a parent approach me about lead in the water and testing for it at all in any of BPS schools. Is that happening? Is there a concern? What's going on?
I would ask, Councilor, any of your constituents, if they have questions or concerns related to this, they can reach out to our facilities team, specifically our environmental unit, to answer those questions. We undertake testing at every single one of our facilities that has water on a yearly basis. The data from those tests are then posted online on a water web page that we have specifically about this. I want to get on to more questions, but actually want to take this as an opportunity to highlight some extremely positive work within the school district over the last few years, so much so that the state is literally now looking to us to help shape policy for the state, and that's because BPS has done a good job of proactively managing the water issue that came up a few years ago. Okay. Districts like Flint, Michigan, and New York City were in the news quite a bit. We were as well, although for a much lesser extent than those other cities. The district received an award last year for its work around lead and water. We do not have any schools right now providing unsafe, unclean water for students. We do have a number of schools whose buildings are what we call offline, meaning that the water fountains that have been there since the buildings were built are no longer turned on, and we have bottled water units in their place.
Okay. So going into specific plots of land or use of land in the BuildBPS plan, and I brought this up last year, I was disappointed that there seemed to be no plan for the Stillman Center, the tennis center in Charlestown. There was a bubble, it was removed. We found out the land ultimately is with BPS's care or, under your purview. And so I had hoped, and that the parents had actually rallied to raise the money to actually build a temporary, at least permanent, by that I mean an actual structure on the land to continue the very successful tennis program named after the family, a good family, a great family in Charlestown. So they raised the money. We were excited. We thought we would get some form of lease. We understood that there might be a change in that lease and those terms, and that BPS may need that land again. So it's been a year since that time. What's BPS's plan with that land? And if there is no plan, why not allow for them to have this program continue?
I can't speak to any of the details related to that right now and wouldn't consider that part of the BuildBPS presentation. I do know that our Chief of Staff, Rob Consalvo, has had ongoing conversations related to that, and will likely be able to follow up with you offline on that topic.
With regards then to the Elliott School, I see what I think the Elliott School, when I look at that, because it's in my district, and I compare it to the other schools in the district, what I think is a perfect example is when BuildBPS wants to invest, or excuse me, BPS wants to invest in a school, puts the resources in that school, it creates an amazing school. That's what the Elliott School is. Absolutely. And it attracts students, it attracts parents, it makes it highly competitive. In this case, it's made it highly competitive. The income, the average income of the families went up, and so did, and the school became wider. My concern is that this is exact example when you contrast to what's happening at East Boston High School, where it seems very clear on paper, BPS has decided this is a school they will not be investing in. It drives displacement of the schools, because when I see my school, my local high school, getting cut $1.2 million, I see that that's BPS not investing in that school. I'm not sending my kid to that school. I'll go to one of the competing charter schools in the district. I will not be going. I will not attract. You do not attract more parents, more families, more excitement about a school when BPS's budgets are cut so extreme. And I guess I'm just so disappointed when I see it can happen. When the money goes to an institution, it's very clear that institution will shine its brightest. BPS can make great schools. But when I see BPS pull away money from a local school, I'm just prepared. And then using the fact that the population's going down, it will only perpetuate continual population decline. And so my frustration is then BPS has this BuildBPS, let's have these middle schools, standalone middle schools, be decreased. You have the Edwards Middle School. 80% of those kids that go there come from East Boston, are bused in there from East Boston over to Charlestown. You want to get rid of that middle school. It seems like a logical step to simply allow for the 6th grade to be moved over to, for the 6th grade to be moved over into swing space into the elementary schools in East Boston, and or allow for the high school to become 7 to 12, to allow then for us to save money on busing, and then also to make up for the fact that we don't have a middle school in East Boston, and hopefully to save our population. But I'm seeing a tale of extremities, and I think it's being exacerbated by BPS's, and I think it's irresponsible in the plan of BuildBPS.
So I'm going to try and take on a few of the different parts of that. I would say, East Boston High School is experiencing significant enrollment decline, both because it was really almost overcrowded at the point when, 4 or 5 years ago, when they were almost 1,500 students in the high school. Enrollment has continued to decline, not because of a lack of popularity, but because we're just seeing a change in the demographic around school-age population for high schools. And this is a regional trend. It's both in terms of the greater Boston area and in terms of really New England in general, that we're seeing larger cohorts of high school students are in their junior, senior year, graduating from our high schools, and they're being replaced by smaller cohorts. So that's what we see in East Boston with East Boston High School. When we started the conversation around reconfiguration, it was there was a lot of momentum both internally and externally to start with the Edwards and to think about potentially creating a 712 in East Boston. When that first conversation started, there were no possibilities. There were too many kids in the high school, and all of the elementary schools were really too small to add a 6th grade, as you mentioned. We've had some changes in enrollment over there. We've had some change in program over there. It does look like that is now a conversation that we can start having with the community. It obviously can't happen very quickly because we need to have a conversation with the Edwards community. We need to have a conversation with the Charlestown community. We need to have a conversation with many schools in East Boston. We've had multiple conversations with the school leaders in East Boston. They have exhibited a lot of leadership around this idea of reconfiguration, coming together and having joint problem solving and joint design conversations around their schools. So we're very excited and optimistic around that conversation. For the K-6 expansion, which there has been a lot of pent-up demand in the district to expand to add sixth grade to our existing K-5 elementary schools. We do have an open process that's happening now for the first round of K-6 expansions happening in the fall of 2020. I believe all of the K-5s in East Boston have applied. We're looking at it as a potential neighborhood conversation rather than have potentially one or two of the schools go. Is this an opportunity for us to really accelerate the conversation? I do think the Elliott is an example of a place where investments in schools can lead to greater demand. We, you know, when we look across, we're excited about investing in our schools to be able to provide the type of facilities that all parents expect. You know, as a parent walking into a school, you know, it's hard not to notice some of our older buildings, which have a great deal of charm, just really need a lot of work to be the 21st century learning environments that we should all be able to expect. I think the growth in the Elliott and demand is both a conversation around investment in facilities, but also in success in a school leader who has come in and turned the school around and has attracted more families. And in weighted student funding, which we'll talk about here again tomorrow and the coming weeks at our budget hearings, what we wanted to do was make sure that our funding is responsive to the number of students who are being served and the type of students who are being served in each of the schools. So Councilor Flaherty already asked a question around when the new facility opens, will we be seeing an expanded enrollment? Part of the expansion is the grades growing up that we've already seen that will be hitting 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, larger cohorts moving through. But we also are starting the conversation with the principal around expanding access for students with disabilities. Now that they are one of our larger K-8 schools, we wouldn't be looking to expand them much beyond, I think next year they're projected to be about 730 students. And then on the other side, of course, is East Boston, this tale of a school that has had to make very difficult decisions, significant changes to their budget. And
There's 13, I think it's 13 teachers we're losing. Yeah.
They have had to make a number. I'll have to look, and we will certainly come prepared to talk about East Boston more specifically at our hearing later this week. And part of the adjustments are changes to schools that are not things that you know, it's always felt when you lose teachers. But it's not changing the academic experience of the students. Okay. Instead of needing 6 high school history teachers, maybe you only need 4 because you've had a change in the number of students you need to serve. That's different from a change where you're no longer you're no longer able to offer multiple languages, or you're not able to offer additional guidance support in the discretionary dollars. We've done additional investments in our operating budget, and now I'm getting a little bit far afield from this topic, but we've done a lot to try and stabilize the experience for students with declining enrollment. There's additional soft landings. We've tried to ease the transition for schools, particularly a school like East Boston, where under the old way of funding our schools, and when I say old way, we've been doing weighted student funding since 2012. So it's prior to 2012 that a school would have had declining enrollment, and then they wouldn't necessarily have had an adjustment to their budget. What we saw was significant disparities between schools with high enrollment and high budgets, and schools with low enrollments and high budgets that we needed to adjust. And it often is much more difficult when we're not doing it on an annual basis, because all of a sudden they'll hit a year where instead of making, you know, East Boston is of course much more extreme this year, but many schools are adjusting down to the right size for the enrollment that they have. So I know that you've touched upon a really big topic, so I could talk about this for a long time, but I'll.
And we do have numerous topics coming up over the next several weeks, including weighted student formula and how that impacts enrollment and funding. But I didn't want to cut you off, John, if you want to add.
That's okay, Councilor. I would
thoughts.
just add just a clarification. The budget change, Councilor Edwards, that you're referring to is on the operating budget and the school budget. What we're talking about here today, as you know, is the capital budget through BuildBPS. We have invested in East Boston High School in recent years through the capital budget. The school received new windows a couple years ago, which is more than a $5 million project. In addition to that, they were part of the first rollout of My Way Cafe. I'm not looking to pat ourselves in the back because it's an old building that continues to need love, just like a number of our buildings across the school district that we're looking to monitor on a regular basis, week in and week out, in terms of where we need to make our capital investments.
I only brought this up also in terms of the configuration is because the standalone middle school is part of, or getting rid of them is part of BuildBPS. The
Yes.
Edwards is what I'm talking about. East Boston students go there. That was the connection I felt in terms of you could have kept the East Boston kids, or you can keep them in East Boston going to East Boston High School, maybe maintain that population so we don't lose $1.2 million.
Yeah, and
That's the only reason why I brought it up.
Oh, no,
in this
it's
conversation.
certainly fair for you to bring it up. I'm only just providing that clarification. And Nate alluded to the issue that we have at hand that you first spelled out about the Edwards Middle School and the fact that many of the students are coming from East Boston. That continues to be one of our priority conversations within BuildBPS so that we can solve for that.
Great. Thank you. Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Councilor CMO. And I know you're investing, John, in the $600,000 in the Blackstone School. Can you give us a little bit of background when that will take place?
It's actually a $5 million project that's being proposed right now through the capital plan for the Blackstone. That is, I don't know if that's specifically what you're referring to, but what we're looking to do is conduct a study starting this summer through the support of the Public Facilities Department to understand what it will take to undertake a project at the Blackstone to close off all of the classrooms within the building. That is tentative right now. It's part of the budget submission, but we're looking to begin that work through the design process in FY20, followed by what we hope to be some construction work to pursue that project in FY21 and beyond.
Okay. Yeah, I was just reading the new project, $600,000, classroom, security measures, HVAC, fire alarm. Interior renovations at the Blackstone?
Yeah, I believe that's just the FY20 allocation for that $5 million project that we've proposed.
Okay. And the other questions I had, I know you're doing some work at the Condon on electrical improvements. Do you have any, the Condon is in the middle of public housing in West Broadway. Blackstone is between Villa Victoria and Cathedral. I really like when BPS does work on schools that are located right near public housing developments or in public housing developments. The Blackstone, the Condon. Also, the Perkins School is not only located at Old Colony, but it's also located across the street from Muriel and McCormick. I think it's the second largest public housing development in Boston. But anything going on with the Perkins? I was there recently, and that could use some work. What's on the agenda for the Perkins School?
I can't speak to that right now, Councilor. I can talk to you offline. I don't know if there's any specific capital project on tap for the Perkins. To my knowledge, there isn't, aside from the district-wide initiatives that will, continue to execute across the city. We do, as you know, maintain our buildings through our operating budget as well. So there's a number of building repairs and fixes that take shape across the district that don't show up in the capital plan.
Okay.
And because the Perkins is one of the schools that feeds currently into the McCormick, they are part of that conversation around K-6 expansion. So the Perkins, the Tynan, each of them will be adding sixth grade in the fall of 2020 as part of the reconfiguration of the McCormick Middle School.
I know Josiah Quincy is getting a new roof. When will that construction begin for that?
Brian, the timing of the roof for the Quincy?
So that's a new project that is being funded in this upcoming capital plan, and so that will be on our list to start over the next year or so. And
Okay.
it will have to go through, sort of a design and then construction process, so probably 2 years
2 years.
or so.
That's, we are working with Josiah Quincy Elementary School also to bring in a new boiler system through the MSBA, which will be going into construction next summer as well.
Okay. Yeah, I know you are making improvements at Josiah Quincy, and I do appreciate the good work that is being done there, so thank you. I was just wondering whether it's to Trish or John, but do you think any way going forward over the next budget cycle or down the road, are we able to consider schools, as I mentioned earlier, that are located in public housing developments? Are we able to give them a little bit of extra consideration as in the budget because they really provide excellent services to a lot of our students in public housing, or is there any type of program that could be beneficial as well?
I can't speak to whether there's any type of program that would be beneficial, but certainly that's something that we could add in terms of how we factor in all the different variables that go on within schools. Certainly, student safety is our foremost concern when making capital investment proposals. And then beyond that, it's clearly the condition of the building and those factors that drive certain decision-making. But all things being equal, if there's a way for us to weave in some, contemplation around public housing nearby, it's certainly something that we could consider.
Yeah, the reason I bring that up is not only is it the school, but the playground during the summertime that kids really use, and you want to have the best playground that we possibly can get for our residents in our developments. So that's just something maybe going forward we can continue to talk about.
Thank you. Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John or Nate, could you guys talk about the McCormick a little bit? So what is there for kids now? What capacity are we looking to get to when it's fully built out? And also, what happens with the partnering school that comes in with that building? If it is cash, what happens with that building? If you could answer those couple of things.
Sure. So we're in the process. There's a couple of public meetings that are happening, or engagements with the communities that are happening this week, getting to a place where we're going to finalize who the partner is going to be moving forward. The size of the 712 that ends at the site there are a number of factors that go into it.
How many kids are there now?
I believe the enrollment at the
McCormick.
I actually have this in front of me. Hold on one sec. They're projected for 360 students for next fall.
Okay, so what do we want for capacity when we go 7 or 12?
When we announced the public sort of RFP for schools to put in their hat, we said we're looking for the 712 to be in the range of 800 to 1,000 students. And that will really depend on the mix of programming that happens at the school. And the simplest example is if there's a classroom that we're using for just general education students that has a capacity of up to 30 kids in high school, 31 students. If it's a special education classroom, the most so for substantially separate would be 12. So it's a third of the capacity if it's a special ed. So the mix of that range will really depend on which special ed programs are there. The two schools that are moving forward in the process, Community Academy of Science and Health, often referred to as CASH, is a smaller of the two high schools. I think the combined high school right now, if you just put all of the programs together, would be something like 650 students.
For Cash and McCormick?
For Cash and McCormick. And then the other school is the Boston Community Leadership Academy, BCLA, currently in Hyde Park. That combined school would be closer to about 700, 750. Now, of course, the two schools will not merge in that sort of simplified state because of the number of programs that are both at the high schools and the middle schools. We need to think about not over-concentrating need in one specific high school. That's part of the design process and the conversations we're having with the community this week. And so once we go through that process over the next year, we'll be going through a design process with the sort of merged school community to be thinking about what upgrades are we going to be doing for the facilities? What do they need to have in the school in terms of science facilities or other non-classroom non-classroom
Functions.
rooms? Yeah, functions. Thank you. Struggled with that word. And then that will really determine what, how the extent of the renovations and
So have we
expansions.
not quite come up with a plan, not a plan, but like the structure, what's going to happen to the structure, additions or anything like that? Is that all going to be kind of thought out now as we figure out who the partner is?
That's right. That design process, and I should probably turn it over to
Because if
Tricia.
it's just a renovation, if you triple in your school population, it seems like a little bit more than a renovation. It seems like big additions or add a story or something like that.
The capacity at the existing building right now is far more than the current enrollment.
Oh, is it? What's the
It's
capacity?
almost double. It's about 620, I believe. And, capacity is a funny subject, right?
Yeah.
You can arrive at capacity in a number of different ways. If it were, say, 650, you can fill 650 very, very quickly with a high school that has an awful lot of special education programming, or you don't even fill it at all with a good-sized high school that has very little special education programming. So that's a consideration that we're going to have to meet out in the next few months as we, number one, choose a partner, a high school partner, to link up with the McCormick, and number two, work with PFD and their contractors to do a design process for us to best ascertain what does a renovation really what kind of renovation would really be required at that site? Would it need to be an expansion, or do we actually have enough space on site as is?
Okay, that makes sense. And so what would happen with those other, let's just say it was Cache, what would happen with the location that Cache is in now?
All of the current buildings that are involved in this will be continued to be used as school buildings. I think part of the reason that we have not laid out more detail into the out years of the BuildBPS plan is because a number of these sort of moves will open up different facilities. If BCLA moves out of Hyde Park, the old Hyde Park High School, there's currently a 712 high school in that building, new mission, that will continue to operate in that building. We'll be thinking about ways to use that space.
So they're in that building together, kind of like Cache is in with the Fenway.
Boston Arts Academy.
That's right. And in terms of the Cleveland building, which is where Cache is, because Cache has already expressed an interest in becoming a 712, if the partnership did not move forward, we might begin the conversation with other middle schools around, is that the right path forward for Cache to have a 712 in that facility? I think we also are looking at overall, in that part of Dorchester, there's a need for more elementary seats, but that's also a good location for high school with such ease of access to the T.
The old Cleveland.
The old Cleveland, literally across the street is the Red Line T stop, which makes it incredibly accessible for our students. So it will likely continue to operate as a high school. But again, once we make that first decision, then we'll again engage with the community
And the
around
first
the use
decision
of it.
being who the partner is going to be with. Then we can figure out design of the building and then what happens with the building, okay?
Exactly. It's sort
I'll
of a
wait
staged
minutes,
process.
so-
The one thing I would add, though, to Nate's answer is that we're also going to be considering the use of space as swing space as well. So it could be that once a building is opened up as part of the McCormick move, we might be moving someone in on a long-term basis. It may also be that it's used as swing space, which is clearly a big need of BuildBPS as well.
For the BuildBPS movements.
For other, exactly, yeah.
Great. Thank you. Councilor McCarthy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Nate, the BCLA point, my ears just perked up. Is there any plans on a move of BCLA with Mission, or?
BCLA is one of the schools that has applied to become a partner with the McCormick,
Right.
in which case they would move into the renovated McCormick building in North Dorchester.
Okay.
So that could potentially lead to McCormick moving out of Hyde Park.
Okay, and then, or BCLA out of Hyde Park?
I'm sorry,
Right.
yes.
And then Mission School would expand?
We obviously need to have that conversation with the school leader at New Mission. I think that is an incredibly high-demand, high-quality school.
It is.
There's certainly enough students who want to enroll in New Mission that expansion I think, is a possibility, but we need to understand, part of the programming is a lot of the experiential work that she does and the school does, referencing Headmaster Naya Wilson. But, I think so we just want to make sure that whenever we do expand, that we continue to expand quality. We don't just assume that we can just add more students and the same high-quality program will continue. So we want to be thoughtful about it, but it is certainly an appealing prospect.
Okay. And then could you give me a Rogers School update?
The Rogers School, the school committee just approved a vote of surplusing the Rogers School building. The topic of surplusing came up in the PFD capital budget conversation related to non-BPS projects. That school building is unfortunately so far gone that it would never be usable as a school again. I know that you know the site very, very well. If we were going to use that as a school again, we would have to tear it down and rebuild. We know that over time there is likely to be a need to solve a grade configuration problem in Hyde Park, but we're not there yet, and we have other more urgent needs pushing against the school district right now in other neighborhoods. So we thought it best to surplus that property right now, and working very closely with the City of Boston with the premise of when we do need to solve the Hyde Park problem over time, that we are allowed to explore parcels that might be available or work with the city to acquire property some other way within that neighborhood.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm a big proponent of the Rogers having some people living there to boost up our Main Street business district. So I'm in complete favor of that. Is there any word on the ACC expansion? Any progress on that, ACC expanding?
I know ACC has interest. You're talking about the 712 expansion. I know the community has certainly expressed interest. We have not continued on the conversations around additional 712 expansions outside of middle school reconfigurations. One of the challenges that happened when we expanded New Mission as sort of a standalone school to go 712 without taking additional capacity offline is we found that it really affected a number of the K-8s in the area, the Roosevelt being one of the schools that was sort of most impacted. So when we approve of 712 expansions, we want to do so when we're either taking middle school capacity offline or we're doing it in partnership with potentially a K-8 moving to K-6. I know that there are a number of K-8s in the area that are interested in partnering with ACC because of the full inclusion model that goes forward, but those are all conversations that are on hold until, again, the McCormick decision happens, and then we can start to lay out which of those conversations are happening on what timeline around ACC expansion.
Okay. My last question is more personnel. Tricia mentioned the 6 PMs that were still available. Are we filling those spots? Or are we, I mean, you guys are, I commend you for doing all the work with 6 empty spots is a lot, but I mean, to do more with less can only go so far before somebody gets, caught, somebody misses something.
Thankfully, Counselor, not all of the positions are project managers, but
Okay.
there are, I believe, 3 of them currently posted. The challenge with project managers is actually finding folks who meet the qualifications that we need. These are very complex projects, and we can't sort of take people who don't have experience, and with the booming construction economy, it's pretty challenging to attract candidates consistently.
Well, Mark and Josh and I are looking for jobs. You have 3 spots.
Hey, that
Just saying, hey, just throwing it out there. No, thank you very much, and again, we'll see you.
Is there a head PM?
We'll be, that's right. We'll be hand in hand for the next 6 weeks. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Councilor Janey. Thanks for looking out for me, Tim.
See, I lost my train of thought because of Tim. I want to focus on Madison. So, as I'm sure you know, Councilor Sabi George, Councilor Wu, and I have been looking into Madison and trying to support Madison over the last 1.5 years. And each of us have raised concerns about Madison not being included in BuildBPS. I see here on, I'm not sure which slide it is, but there are some investments, ongoing projects around locker room, $6 million. That's not mine.
That's on you.
That's not mine. And then another $6 million on electrical improvements, yes?
Correct. Yes.
So let me just ask this question. So there was a floor for their gym that was donated free of charge from one of our amazing championship sports teams that is now ruined because of a leak. And from what I understand, you know, calls were made. So just help me understand what happens when there's an active leak in a building and things have to be repaired so that we're not wasting this wonderful investment that was a gift that now has to be replaced, and now the city's going to have to replace the floor and pay for it because we let the free gift go to waste. What happens when someone's calling around needing the roof repaired or whatever happened in this situation? And then I have a similar story with brand-new playground, outdoor classroom for another school in my district that now just looks overrun. So I don't know if that's the school's responsibility to take care of it, if that's central. What kind of upkeep is happening? How do we make sure that the money that we are investing on these major capital projects are not going to waste?
Unfortunately, a theme within several of our conversations related to BuildBPS is that for many years, the district allowed deferred maintenance to pile up and did not have a windfall like BuildBPS to beat it back. And that's ultimately what we have right now. It's going to take some time, but we now have the resources to invest capital in buildings so that we can try to avoid these kinds of crises that have come up in the past. I can say for the Madison Park O'Brien Complex, building number 4, they are scheduled to get a new roof through the capital plan. That process has already begun, but as was mentioned earlier related to the roof for the Quincy Elementary School, it's a lengthy process. It's a long project between both design and construction for a new roof. So to answer your immediate question, well, what happens when there's a leak? So either the school will submit a work order or they'll reach out directly to our facilities team, and that facilities team will dispatch staff who work in the building repairs unit within facilities so that they can get out to try to address these concerns through contracts that we have. That happens on a regular basis. I note that there's been some rain over the weekend. There's going to continue to be some rain this week. We will likely be dispatching teams from our facilities staff to go out to schools where leaks are reported. We then use operating budget funds to be able to patch those roofs as much as we can, as quickly as we can. It seems to be the case with building number 4 at the Madison Park Complex that the level of that has gotten beyond what we can do with temporary repairs. We're going to continue to patch it up as much as we possibly can while working on the capital project to get a new roof put in place.
And so the new roof, is that in this budget, the FY20 budget?
Yeah, the new roof should be going into construction this summer for building 4.
Okay, and so you're going to do that this summer for building 4?
It's been designed. It's been in
While the kids are away. So what happens to the summer school that happens there? That's a different building?
No, there's likely to be plenty of activity within that complex over the course of the summer. You can have projects to certain building components without impacting what goes on within the building.
That's a great segue to my next question. So one of the things that has come up in our year-and-a-half-long discussion with the Madison school community is the need for just a new building overall. And, you know, one concern is that Madison is such a specialty school. There's not really, you know, swing space available at another school. In terms of using the existing space for swing space, because the number of students, there's a lot of extra space in that building, do you think it's possible to use the existing building as swing space, moving students from one side of the building to the other side of the building during some sort of construction phase that would really improve the building overall in terms of really making it a state-of-the-art building? Or do you think it just has to be kind of torn down and built back up? Or a whole new location has to be found?
I think it's very hard for us to be able to say that in the moment right now because the program itself is it is a specialized program, as you mentioned. They require different facility needs that other schools don't offer. And it could be that when you're looking to rebuild those particular components within their complex right now, that you then can't offer the programming that takes place within those components. It's hard to say. You spelled out 3 different options. I don't know which of those options we would have to pursue if we're going to undertake a new building for that school.
Right, so who are the folks that should be part of that conversation beyond who's here on this panel?
I think it's a couple different conversations, Counselor. Number one, as you spell out, you know, the school is not referenced in the BuildBPS report. You know, more than I'd say 120 of our buildings aren't mentioned by name in that report. We have made a series of investments there, including, I believe, more than $20 million worth of investments over a 5-year period within the capital budget. If there's a conversation to be had regarding a whole new building for that school, that's one conversation with one group of stakeholders. You know, folks within BPS, certainly within the Madison Park community, would be part of that conversation. And then if in that decision tree it's decided that, yes, a new building is going to be what's needed, or something to that effect, then I think it's a separate conversation as to, okay, now which of these 3 options do we need to pursue?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Redwoods.
So, and also a thank you for the Warren Prescott. We got, I believe, a modular classroom added to that school to help with the growing population. So is that when is that to come online, and how much does that cost?
The modular will be coming online this upcoming school year, so the work will take place this summer, allowing the school to have more than enough space for that community. The cost of it right now is, first of all, when you're putting in a modular, it's a lease arrangement. We believe that yearly cost is going to be about $230,000, I believe, over the next couple of years.
Okay, so we, and that's going to then be what, how does that plan work with Edwards School? What is your plan for the Edwards, I guess?
We're back at the Edwards again, aren't we?
We're going to stay on the Edwards until we
That's
figure
okay.
out how this is going to help and work. Because what we're told in Charlestown is we're waiting for East Boston, and we're told in East Boston we're waiting for Charlestown.
Yeah.
So what's the plan?
And it's absolutely fair to end up back at the Edwards because, as has been reported before, one of the main principles or stepping stones to our work with BuildBPS revolves around the middle schools. And those middle schools then provide, they almost act as pivot points within neighborhoods. And so we do understand that we have to solve for, quote unquote, solve for the Edwards issue. You know, what happens to the Edwards building? It is very, very close to the Warren Prescott. It could be part of a conversation related to the Warren Prescott expansion. It might not. It's certainly part of the conversation related to East Boston, as you referenced before, because as you rightly pointed out, the majority of the students there come from East Boston. So when solving for that particular pivot point in the Edwards, we're also solving for essentially 2 different neighborhoods, Charlestown and East Boston.
Right, and so we have the now, I'm assuming this modular is temporary.
The modular would be temporary as we work to provide a solution for the Edwards, Warren Prescott, and the other schools in those 2 neighborhoods.
Right, and I know you had mentioned that fall 2020 might be a time where there's a neighborhood expansion of 6th grades in the East Boston.
The first process for expanding K-6s in our district is for the fall of 2020. We opened it up for schools to apply if they felt like they met a certain set of criteria. We're now evaluating I believe there were 14 schools that applied, including the schools in East Boston. In these situations, what we look to do is evaluate potential pilots so that we can learn from the expansion of K-6 and its effect on enrollment patterns. And we wouldn't normally be thinking about multiple schools in the same neighborhood because that would basically lead to a de facto reconfiguration of whatever middle school they currently feed. So in the case of East Boston, because I believe we received applications from each of the schools, that we are figuring out how to potentially have an accelerated conversation, which was part of the commitment, again, when we were out to the community in both East Boston and in Charlestown. As you mentioned, that both communities are champing at the bit to have the conversation around what the future is. And so we want to start that conversation in earnest. We're just trying to sequence a lot of big conversations, as we've learned from the McCormick process, that we need to give it time. We need to give people the opportunity to voice their opinions in future. And, you know, I don't want to sort of make it sound like we're sort of dismissive of the Edwards community as a school community, because, you know, that is a school that needs to, their voice needs to be heard in this process, in terms of what their future is going to be and who their, where the staff will go, where the students will enroll, and where the programs will go. So I think we're at the beginning stages of that conversation. We want to move very quickly, but we can't move sort of.
So just to add that conversation, I know our high school is ready to take on swing space for the 6th grade, so they're excited to do that this year.
I mean, I think
and
every
then also
time
just to go on, I mean, honestly, and then just to fill in terms of the conversation and community outreach, I think I went to the BPS meeting at 5 o'clock in Charlestown, 5 p.m. in Charlestown, and 8 a.m. in East Boston. And so I'm sure you're going to have another round or continue those rounds of community conversations. I would encourage them to be recorded, those conversations, so folks who can't make those due to work could actually watch the conversations later, and also maybe putting them even later for folks. The 8 a.m. was, I think, wasn't highly attended, but I think that had a lot to do with the folks that, you know, you're trying to struggle with schedules. So this is not a critique. It's just adding to the conversation some more time slots and possibly recording them. So. Yeah,
I was just going to say that the headmaster of East Boston, every time he's in the bowling building, stops by and asks me when he can go 7-12. So there are many advocates. For East Boston, we held a second community meeting in East Boston in the evening because the 9 a.m. or 8 a.m. meeting was poorly attended. And for the McCormick conversations, Monica's team has started to record those presentations and post them so that people who can't attend can watch them online. I think that's something that they're working for. I think it's a great suggestion and way to, you know, I'm you know, as a parent, very busy, and trying to get to these community meetings is difficult, so we want to make sure it's available in multiple ways.
Thank you. That's it.
Thanks. Councilor Flint, right? Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Siomo. Is it all right if I ask Public Facilities a question during this time?
Yeah,
or?
sure.
Okay.
I would encourage it.
Okay. Thank you, Trish, again, for taking my questions. Could you give us a little bit of background on the BPL, the Public Library project at Central Division on the rear books that will take place or is about to take place?
Absolutely. We are in the process of bidding the work now to start construction this summer. The scope of work will include replacing the HVAC system. It'll be a very sort of high-tech HVAC system, appropriate for the type of collection that they're protecting there. There are also spaces for storage and for the staff to work on the collection. There's also a reading room that we'll be working on, as well as some sort of building envelope repairs to make sure that the space is protected going forward.
No, thank you. That library is certainly in my district, but I know everyone from across the city really uses it, so thank you for the great work there. And also, could you give us a little bit of background information on the EMS Seaport Station that's noted in there?
So I know that there is some conversation around finding a location for that, for an EMS station in that area. I can't say, Counselor, if that location has been found. I know that there's funding available when there is a site to be considered to do some due diligence around that and to try to establish the needs from a programmatic standpoint so that we could do fit tests and whatnot. But right now, they're there isn't active work that Public Facilities is involved in.
Okay. Yeah, I think that'd be a great addition, is to have a EMS location in the Seaport. Certainly building city services in the South Boston waterfront is critical. And I think my last question is I do want to say thank you to you and your staff and to Mayor Walsh on the great work you're doing on plans for Long Island. I had the opportunity as a probation officer to visit Long Island almost weekly. My probationers were there, and that facility played such a crucial and important role in the city in helping people on their recovery plans. I know Councilor Baker has also been a strong advocate as well. What can the public do on that issue in regards to providing support to your office, or providing support to the mayor's office? Or is there any recommendations on what the public can do? They always ask us, what's the next step, or what involvement could they do? But any advice or recommendations?
So I would certainly advise folks to reach out to the Office of Recovery Services or the Public Works Department, the Health and Human Services Department. They're really doing yeoman's work to try to get this bridge rebuilt, which will really open the campus for, sort of the tremendous opportunity that we have to take care of our most vulnerable in the city. So I'm sure the city would welcome any support that we can receive to move the project along.
Yeah, thank you, Trish. And I do know that Chief Marty Martinez and Jen Tracy are doing great work on this. It's such an important project for the city, and there are a lot of great dedicated city employees that are really working hard on that plan. So thank you, and that's all I have, Councilor.
Thank you. Councilor Baker.
Just around the Elliott School, what is the, what did we get for buildings when we sold 174 North? Did we get 3 buildings from the North Bennett Street School, or 2 buildings?
Just 2, right? I believe 2, and we renovated the Salem Street Elliott as one of them. I'm not sure the disposition of the other building.
Was that on Tyleston or something, a smaller building?
The Salem Street is on the corner of Towson and Salem.
Right.
Okay, was there another building in there though, too, Brian?
There's 3 buildings for the Elliott campus.
Okay. The existing Elliott School on Charter?
Charter.
The old North
Salem,
Bennett Street School?
which is Salem and Towson, and then 585 Commercial Street will be the 3rd.
What's the square, do we know what the square footage is on the Salem Street building?
Sorry, not off the top of my head.
We could easily find that for
Okay,
you.
yeah, not that, I'm just trying to, for my own clarification. What did we spend, how much was 585 commercial? And what did we put into 585 commercial?
585 commercial, the total project budget is 19.5 million.
That's what the build-out is, and what did we pay for the building? Is that all in?
That's just for the
Construction,
cost of the
yeah.
I think it was somewhere around $15 million, Council, but I will definitely follow up on that.
Okay. And my last point is, so when we got in that deal with the North Bennett Street School, I've asked this question every year since it's happened, and I haven't ever gotten an answer. They were supposed to provide scholarships, North Bennett Street School. That would go back to Mike Galvin close to 10 years ago. So if anybody could, maybe put Brian on that. He looks like he's eager over there. So we'll put Brian on that one, and I can just harass him for the next
If
month.
anyone can do it, Councilor.
Okay. Yeah, so
That could be a 3-person job.
the reason why I asked square footage is because when that deal originally happened, the print department was 50,000 square feet. We practically gave that building away and took a couple of not great buildings. So that's my interest. Old grudges die hard. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm done.
Councilor Flynn.
Yeah, thank you for taking my final question, and I guess one more comment. Do you have a status of what the current situation is of the old Abraham Lincoln Building in the Bay Village. I was there over the weekend, walking around and talking to residents of the Bay Village, and they just asked me if I could, get a little bit of background information on what the current status of Abraham Lincoln Building is.
If you don't mind, Counselor, please just clarify on what you might mean by status of the building, in terms of the condition of the building?
Yeah.
Sure. So about 2 years ago, we made some significant investments into the building, plastering some walls, scraping some ceilings, repainting hallways, shoring up some security features of the building. To my knowledge, the building is, it is not one of the better conditioned buildings within the school district. It is not in imminent need of closure or anything along those lines, which is an experience, unfortunately, we've had in West Roxbury and also in Brighton of late. However, we're continuing to monitor that building while also working, as you know, with the Josiah Quincy Upper School on a long-term plan for that building, for that school. Once that solution is arrived at for the school's long-term home, so to speak, then we'll have a separate conversation or a separate decision to make about what happens with the Lincoln Building itself.
Okay, thank you. And I just wanted to make a general statement on Council Baker's comments. My uncle also worked at the City of Boston printing department, and I know the printers in the city did a tremendous job. A lot of them went to school with me at Don Bosco. And provided an excellent service to the residents of Boston. So I just want to say thank you to Councilor Baker for his work, but also to the other printers across the city that are no longer working there, unfortunately, but they really helped make Boston a great city. So I just wanted to recognize their work for our city as well.
Thank you. Councilor Baker.
Yeah, just one last statement, more of just an ask probably of you, John. So the Mason School, they're doing good work down there. I was wondering if you had just mentioned about the Abraham Lincoln, the scraping, the painting. It seems like there's a lot of that sort of stuff they could use that there. Should I advocate with you, or where should I start that?
You just did.
Okay.
I'll talk to the facilities team
thought.
today, and I'll see if someone can maybe.
Yeah, anything that we can do, and I'm going to work and see if I can get some volunteer organizations over there to do the same sort of thing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, everybody.
Well
Thank
said.
you.
Thank you, Council.
You're all set, thanks. John, Nate, Trish, Brian, Steve, thank you very much for today's testimony. I'm sure we'll be seeing each other again, probably at some point down the road during these discussions. And thanks again for your time and talent, and this hearing stands adjourned.
Thank you very much.